Thank you. Welcome, Anna Issacson. We are thrilled that you can join us for this broadcast to raise awareness for the Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women, hashtag EVAW. We've worked together for a number of years on addressing domestic and sexual violence. And if you could just briefly introduce yourself, and then we can go into some questions.
Sure. Happy to be here. My name is Anna Issacson, and I am the Senior Vice President of Social Responsibility for the NFL, the National Football League.
Excellent. So tell me, how did the league first get involved in it's really a leading organization in addressing these issues. How did you all first get involved?
So the truth is, Jane, and you know this, but we first got involved in a time of crisis for the NFL. Back in 2014, we found ourselves in a really challenging time where several of our players were accused and found themselves in a situation where they had committed acts of violence. And we really looked in the mirror at that time and said, what should the NFL be doing in this space? We knew, and we learned quickly from experts, that violence against women, domestic violence, sexual violence wasn't something that was unique to sports or unique to the NFL. But we still, needed to be reflective in that moment and say, is there something more that the NFL can be doing to help move society forward on these issues? And thankfully, we had great leadership in Commissioner Goodell, who said, yes, we should be in this space and we should help to lead. And so that's what we did about 10 years ago.
It was interesting because like with most crises, it wasn't the act itself, it was the response, right? And that was what you all learned was not to be so insular, right? To look outside for advice. And I think you really set a tone for a lot of other organizations, which is amazing. So what steps did you take once you realized you needed to do more?
I think to your point, we knew and we realized really quickly that we did not have a deep enough understanding of the topic. And that's where we stepped into hot water and where we made mistakes is we really had a lack of knowledge. And we realized there was a lack of awareness within our entire organization, within the NFL family. And so we started to think about our work in this area in three categories. We said, okay, what do we have to do internally? Right? Mm-hmm. How do we have to look in the mirror? How do we have to educate the NFL family? What training do we have to do? What policies do we have to put into place? We also looked, externally, and we said, what is our role in society? How can we help move our fans forward? How can we help move young people forward in this space? How can we use the NFL platform to make a difference? How can we use our resources to make a difference? So we looked internally, we looked externally, and then we said, and also we have to really beef up our personal conduct policy and our discipline and make sure that people are being held accountable. And when we looked at our policies, it wasn't just about the discipline, but really about how do we do more to protect and to help people who are survivors of violence, who may be victims of violence. And we created a whole set of policies to address those needs.
Right. And those are not just for the players, but potentially for the players' families and other people who may be impacted. Yes?
Correct. I mean, it's for anyone who is connected or affiliated in any way with the NFL family. And those policies stay in place now 10 years later.
Yeah, it's really incredible. So can you talk a little bit about the education? You all do something that is unusual, is that you have, for the last 10 years, educated every member of the NFL from top to bottom on domestic and sexual violence for an hour every year. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's something that we learned from advisors and experts early on in the space. They said education is obviously critical, but what is more critical is repeating that education and not assuming that you're going to educate people once and they're going to be experts on DVSA. And so we really took that to heart. I don't think at the time we realized that most companies weren't doing this, but we said, okay, we're going to set out and we're going to educate every member of the NFL family every year. And, the first year we worked really hard to, it was really a domestic violence, sexual assault 101, making sure people really had an understanding of the topic and the issue and making sure that people had the resources if they needed them. But then every year after that, it became, what do we do to keep this fresh, interesting, so that people who sometimes are working for the NFL for many years, or players who are playing in the NFL for many years, aren't seeing the same exact thing over and over and over again. How do we make sure that we're getting the main points across again, that we're driving home the most important things, but we're also bringing new topics and new areas into the space, right? So one year we focused on being an active bystander, for example. Another year we focused a little bit more on child abuse. One year we talked about being a bystander as it relates to sexual violence. And so we've really tried to think about the different areas of this issue and bring those to light in our education. We're now on year 11 of education. We just completed it for all NFL players and are going through education for all NFL staff and NFL club staff as we speak. And we're doing things this year more on healthy relationships and other really, really important topics.
That's great. So you mentioned, you do a very thorough job. You do internal, you look at policies, you work externally, you work with nonprofits. It really is sort of the perfect circle of how to address these issues or any issue. How do you work with your nonprofit partners? What is some of the most impactful work you've done over the years?
So early on, we formed two major national partnerships in the U.S. And one was with the hotline, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and the other was with the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. And from that relationship was formed a sort of consortium of the biggest sexual violence organizations in the country called Reliance. And so we wanted to make sure that we were both investing on both sides of the topic, on DV and on sexual violence. And so we formed long-term multi-million-dollar partnerships with each of those organizations and really spent time working with them on how to take on some of the biggest challenges that those organizations were facing. So for example, at the time, the hotline, believe it or not, struggled to answer all the calls that were coming in. And it still remains a struggle to this day. And so our dollars really went directly to that. How can we help the hotline answer more calls? And, I think from those two relationships, we really learned that we did not want to be a check writing organization. We wanted to be a partner in this space and have an ongoing relationship. And so from those two big national partnerships, we started then looking at small local grassroots organizations that were reaching the underrepresented communities throughout our country. And so we now probably have funded, I mean, it's probably more than 100 organizations that are working in this area all across the country in different communities, but still with our two anchor partnerships being Reliance and the hotline.
You also do something every year in the communities you enter into, whether it's for draft or kickoff or the Super Bowl, where you engage the local community on these issues. And can you talk just briefly about Unsung Heroes? Because you've done it for the last 10 plus years, and it's really has grown to be quite an amazing event on lots of different levels.
Sure. So one of the earliest moments I had in this space was actually visiting the domestic violence hotline in Austin, Texas, and having an opportunity to watch advocates answer the phone and see with my own eyes. I was with, NFL leadership and commissioner, and he was there too, seeing how hard people work and how emotional those calls can be when you're answering the phone and when someone is relying on you to help them in an instant. And so from that experience and several others, we decided to create Unsung Heroes every year at Super Bowl, which is our biggest event, and make sure that there was a moment Super Bowl week every year where people who are on the other end of the line are being recognized and where those advocates are being celebrated and being lifted up for the work that they're doing. And just an acknowledgement that this one, brunch for them, is to say thank you for being on the under end of the line, for being an advocate, for working in this space, for choosing to work in this space when you could do something else, because we know how taxing that is and how hard it is. So that's an event that is really uplifting. It's meant to celebrate these people in the community who are focused on trafficking and violence against women and sexual violence and intimate partner violence. And it actually is one of our most uplifting and celebratory events of Super Bowl week every single year.
it's amazing event, and I have had the privilege of attending, and it's lovely to see the advocates just love it. Anna, thank you so much for taking time. I know you have an incredibly busy schedule, but we really, really appreciate your taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having me.